1974, and this week leaves us after more than 43 years with our organisation. 1974 is a very significant year, Kerry. That was the year I joined the Housing Commission in Wagga Wagga. I was only a wee lad at that time, of course. Kerry's commitment to the County Council over the decades is a testament to her hard work and adopting to countless changes that have taken place since 1976. In January last year, you started your transition to retirement, and now the time has come to say farewell, and we sincerely thank you for your contribution. You will be missed not only by myself and the board, but by all our staff who have worked with you over the years, and we hope that you have a long and very enjoyable retirement. In recognition of your service, we would like to present you with something not all of us get, is a gold watch.
Oh, how exciting.
In recognition of your service,
Thank you.
and we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good on you. Okay. Could we get all the board up to have a photo with Kerry? I think that would be lovely if we can.
We'll just get one.
Huh? Get one over here. We'll just take it. Okay. This is your job, Kerry. Take the photo. Board members?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, look, we're down the board.
You're already there.
I haven't got hat hair.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine.
All ones at the back.
I think just get you to bunch in. If you're short, stand more at the front maybe. Yeah. Vanessa, you might be able to come stand in front a little bit more.
No.
Just
And Andrew, after this, can we get a photo with Tamara and the other people for the opening of the boardroom? Huh? What?
yeah, just make sure you can see. You can't see me, I can't see you. So make sure. Yeah, actually, do you want to be? You want to move a little bit this way for me, Vanessa? Just a step, a little bit more.
Step.
A little bit more. And you just step forward for me. And you come forward a little bit as well. There we go. Yeah. All right, everyone looking at me, please. Stay there. Take one on the flash. Beautiful. Thank you. Let's get.
Stay there, Kerry.
Stay there. We're going to get one.
Who do you want? Staff.
Who's involved in these work? Okay.
Stay over here, please, Doug.
You want us to?
I don't mind.
Staff and the board.
Yeah, will we fit us all in?
We can try.
No?
Just to get you a bit more school photo staying at home.
Squeeze in. Come on.
That's you two, Kerry.
That's for you, Kerry.
Leaving
Do you want to go?
Yeah, we might go at the back corner, guys.
So I'll go up the back. More space.
Oh, yeah, back wall.
We can go out the door.
Back wall.
Back in line.
Come on, we've got to
Give
get
me a
up.
moment.
Thanks, Greg. We're not escaping. You better get in there.
Hey, mate.
It's your group.
Cameron, you hop in the middle here. I can look over your head. I'm sure you can. I was going to say there'd be words.
New room practices.
Oops. Right, okay. I'll officially declare the 2019 December board meeting officially open in our new boardroom. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of the land. I would also like to pay respect to their people, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal Australians who may be present. Okay. Apologies. Do we have any apologies? No apologies. Do we have anyone seeking leave of absence? Future meetings? Okay. Declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest. Councillor Fennell.
Yes, confidential 2, I believe it is, the significant pecuniary interest in relation to the Mid-Murrumbidgee. If I've got the report number wrong, I'll correct that later date. But it's in relation to the purchase of water for the Mid-Murrumbidgee. I'm a
Okay, noted.
water user in that area.
Any others?
And I'll leave the chamber.
Thank you. Councillor Koschel.
Report 1, which is just the investment report, non-significant, non-pecuniary. It's just I work as a regional manager for a bank, and there's a lot of banks named in that report, so I will stay in the chamber though.
Thank you, Councillor Koschel. Any further? Okay. Confirmation of minutes held on the 30th of October 2019. Somebody like-
Mr Chair.
Councillor Meyer, seconded. Councillor Keenan. All those in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Was there anything arising out of those minutes? Right. We have done the acknowledgement to staff in relation to the new meeting room, and also I think as part of our board minutes we should recognise the service of Kerry Fawcett on the occasion of her retirement after 45 years of service. So well done.
Might get a move in second.
Could I get a thank you, Councillor Keenan. Councillor Koschel. I will say that as a motion of appreciation. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Correspondence. You have your correspondence in front of you. The local government circulars which you get through your own council, and there's minutes of the staff consultative meeting and the Work Health and Safety Committee. Would somebody like to recommend that the correspondence be received? Councillor Fennell, second it. Councillor Koschel. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Item 1 is the financial statements, list of investments, recommendation that the report detailing Council's external investments for the month of October and November 2019 be received. Have a mover, Councillor Conkey, seconded Councillor Burke. Any questions? No questions? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 2, minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meetings held 18 September and 20 November 2019. Recommendation that the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meetings be received and noted. Do I have a mover? Councillor Braid, Councillor Meyer. Questions? No questions. I will put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. one is... Item 3 is Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Charter. Recommendation that Council adopt the attached Interim Audit Risk and Improvement Committee ARIC Charter as presented in this report, noting that this will be amended as necessary once the Office of Local Government guidelines are finalised. Councillor Keenan, moved. Councillor Fennell, questions? I do have a question to you, Mr. General Manager, or to Emily. I know a lot of the smaller councils have raised issues about the new requirements under the new audit and risk committees and the additional costs that it's going to impose if all those interim recommendations are imposed on, and I think, I know for Lockhart it looks something like in the vicinity of $150,000 that would be, and that's apart from being able to find those people who, with those qualifications to do that job. And whilst we're in a strong financial position, I don't like to see us spending money unnecessarily, and I'm just wondering, I assume that the JO is making representations on that, on the costs?
Through you, Chair, yes, they certainly are, and in fact we made a submission by the closing date, which I think was the end of November. Staff management have quite a few concerns, some of which you've alluded to. So our submission went off, and in talking with the Office of Local Government, they're getting swamped with negative feedback on the guidelines. Our estimate, if you were to introduce it in the current form to this organisation, would be upwards of $300,000. You're compelled to employ a chief audit executive who reports directly to the, so operationally through the GM for supervisory purposes, but to the chairman of the ARIC for direction and where their work is, where the work's undertaken. So the industry has a view, if I could generalise, that they're trying to impose on local government an ARIC structure that is used by state government agencies where, you know, money isn't as tight. The JO is making, or has made, a submission, and so have we, which largely reflected the submission made by Lockhart Shire, I have to say, because it was a very good submission. So we can, if you're interested, I can distribute that submission to you, but it's certainly, it's within our financial capacity to comply with whatever legislation comes in, but it's a massive overkill for an organisation this size. And I've started discussions with Golden Fields Water about shared resources on that, including members who sit on the ARIC. And the thing that should concern board members is that there are no board members on the new ARICs. They're totally independent, whereas at the moment we have 2 independents and a councillor delegate voting on that committee. So it removes local government.
Councillor
Question to the General Manager, Mr Chair. Would it be possible to get that this afternoon, please?
Sure can.
Thank you.
Councillor Keenan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just another comment to add to that. I understand that these requirements are also being put upon joint organisations as well, and of which Riverina Water and our councils are members of, and that ratepayers are paying for as well. These joint organisations have very, very small staffing numbers, but have the same requirements that they'll have to be abiding by as well. And in terms of overkill for Riverina Water, it's also going to be a significant overkill for joint organisations as well.
Certainly, and given on top that we've just had the added impost of the Auditor General being added onto our external auditing costs, you know, it's just another instance of I think massive impositions on local government that doesn't have the capacity to raise funds to offset that. So I think it's important that we strongly object to some of those proposals. So I just thought I'd make mention of that.
Mr. Chairman, having scrolled through all the agenda, there's no accountability for anybody there as far as I'm concerned. It might be my problem not seeing it. You've got a great thing called audit right across the board, which encompasses everything, the audit business, but there's nobody accountable. You can say it comes back to the board or the general manager, but nothing says that he or she will go to jail or will be prosecuted if this happens. Nowhere in any of the legislation I could find that anybody's accountable for.
Well, I guess
So
you're...
is it all hot air to the police government departments or not, sort of thing? I mean, surely everything else should lead to a ultimate cause. You've got the Royal Commission into banks because...
Well, I don't think it's fair to say there's no accountability, because this
Well, you
council
just
is
pointed out.
evidence of where someone has been held accountable for something. So, you know, there is accountability,
Where?
but it's in the criminal law that if you breach or if you defraud, you're subject to the law, the criminal law. So I don't think they're going to, you know, rewrite that to be incorporated in this charter. I just think, as Councillor Keenan's pointed out, it's just massive overkill, and may be fine for a city of Sydney or, you know, one of those. But for most councils that are struggling to make ends meet, I think it's just a terrific impost. And I think everyone understands they've got to have an audit and risk committee, and I think the way they've been set up, where councils are sharing across the board, and general managers are acting as auditors on other councils, I think is pretty appropriate. So anyway, we'll leave that at that. I just thought that should be...
One final comment to get my message across, Mr. Chairman. If anything goes wrong, anything goes belly up in this room, we can all just vacate the seat. Unless there's something wrong with my understanding of life, there's no accountability.
Through you, Chair.
Mr. General Manager.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, the accountability is applied via the Act in terms of the code of meeting, complying with the code of meeting practice and the behaviours that we all have at this table. And then the code of conduct has very strong powers. If people take actions that aggrieve other persons, there are means of reporting that. There are also other acts in relation to the ICAC, reporting items to ICAC. The General Manager has obligations. I have obligations in that area. So I would say that there are mechanisms that aren't in this document. It's a charter, but there are other mechanisms that can hold people to account that can be used, that they're typically not used here because we don't demonstrate those behaviours. But they're strong and they're there.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. All right, we have a mover and a second. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 4, risk appetite matrix and statements. Recommendation that Council review the proposed risk appetite matrix and associated statements as proposed by the executive team and approve their adoption. Do I have a mover? Councillor Fennell. Seconded, Councillor Koshal. Mr. General Manager, or Emily, did you want to give a brief summary of this?
Sure can. It actually also comes under the Manager Governance's purview, so he and the Governance Coordinator have done a power of work in this space. So some councillors will be aware of what a risk appetite matrix is and the associated statements. Councils are generally moving in that direction, and Table 1 within the attachment outlines in a not succinct way what management are recommending to the board to be our appetite around the 8 or 9 categories there. So in terms of service delivery for water quality, we've got an avoidance appetite, same for work health and safety, financial, environmental, corporate governance and compliance, and IT. So our appetite for risk in those areas is avoid any risk. The third column across should actually say accept, the yellow column, not general, at the top. And what it's saying there is that there's an appetite to accept some risk in service delivery where it's innovative and with lower risk, and also community partnerships. And we thought that the community engagement programs are, the community grants program is an example of that. As is projects, we think that the board would think that we have an acceptance appetite for some risk around projects that deliver innovation predominantly, and also within IT to be, again, probably demonstrated a bit in this room, but in terms of the new technology. But so we're asking the board to consider, and then appearing below that are the long-form statements about the risk appetites for the various categories.
Any questions? Sorry, Councillor Fennell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to make a comment in relation to the long form that they've started on in relation to the financial, because it's good to see that this is actually taking place now, not just in that area, but given despite what we hear in the media, politically, etc., interest rates, for example, are at an all-time low. Whilst we're in a healthy financial position, you can see in our previous minutes, our previous report there, that our financial position is coming under some risk due to reduced interest rates, etc. So we have all these factors. It's pleasing to see avoid risk on the financial. However, obviously we have to have some risk. There is always some risk there, and that's controlled obviously within our parameters of where we can and can't invest. So I actually welcome this document because I know we've been riding the wave for a little while now, and I'm a bit concerned that some people may become complacent when we're in this position in the event things do turn a bit south. I know we're in a good position and continuing to be so due to the ongoing drought and increased water sales, but all these things do change. It's cyclical and we know that. So I welcome this report and the fact that we're looking at it seriously and improving our risk matrix and management.
Thank you, Councillor Fennell. Any further questions? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 5 is Workshop Operational Plan 2020-21. Recommendation that Council hold a workshop to discuss key aspects of the 2020-21 operational plan following Council's February 2020 meeting. Have a mover.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Meyer, Councillor Quinn. Any questions? Please make yourself available. That's a very important meeting. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Gentleman.
Through you, Chair. In the interim, if you've got any views around, you want us to do some modelling on zero rate increase is pretty easy, but anything between there and CPI, and we'll be presenting those scenarios to the workshop as we've done for the last few years. But it'd be helpful to. The chairman usually gives me his views around some stuff, but it's helpful in advance of that workshop if you've got a view or you're getting representations from people about their water pricing policy. It'd be handy for us to be aware of that and we can prepare better. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I think given the note or the comments made by Councillor Fennell a minute ago about the delicacy of our financial position, that perhaps the report should indicate how often this would be called upon, what we would lose in terms of initial revenue in a given year.
Thank you. That if we held it at zero, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yep. All right. We won't preempt anything, but it's good if you want to have some modelling done. Please let the general manager or the manager of finance your thoughts. Okay. We have a mover and a seconder. Did I put that? Yes. Carried. All those in favour? Right, aye. Item 6, time payment options for Riverina Water County Council Development Servicing Plan. Recommendation that Council work in partnership with Wagga Wagga City Council in preparing a report to both councils that present options for time payment plans for both councils' respective developer contribution plans. Move, Councillor Fennell. Seconded, Councillor Keenan. Questions, comments? Yes, Councillor Fennell.
I'd just like to encourage this further. It's been an ongoing issue. I'm pleased to see this report coming up and the fact that we're going to work in conjunction with the other councils as well. Something that's come up over a number of years regarding development contributions. I'm certainly fully supportive of developer contributions, do not get me wrong there. But again, it can be prohibitive on the basis to stifling some development. I don't know how some of the smaller constituent councils or towns and things get on, but I know even in the the main city of Wagga and surrounds, it does become prohibitive if a lot of these costs are up front, you know, and particularly given, whilst we're not meant to be a bank or a financial institution, given the, again, the current financial climate, the difficulty of financing projects, etc., whether they be residential, commercial, agricultural, whatever, if we can do something in that space that allows development to take place, because that provides the growth, jobs, etc., we know how that economics works. In the past, this has been a problem. So I welcome this report. I encourage we come up with a workable model and go to the industries and say, you know, and get their input through consultation along with council. So I certainly welcome and look forward to seeing the outcome of this.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
My apologies, Mr Chair. My previous comments were actually directed at this. They weren't directed at the previous resolution.
Okay.
I sincerely apologise.
That's all right.
I have a question to anyone. What if the developer doesn't pay? What is our recourse?
Short answer is Land and Environment Court. And we've had an example of that with Nash Brothers.
Yes.
As recently as 3 years ago. That cost us in the order of 300 grand to win the case and then settle it.
But that wasn't, we didn't have deferred contributions then, did we?
Yes, they were deferred.
They were deferred contributions, right, okay. So that's our only recourse is through?
Land and Environment Court.
Yeah, okay.
Once you go past the release of the linens, you have no bonding security.
So the release of an occupation certificate can't be held up?
Well, that would be for Wagga City.
Wagga City, right, okay.
If I may, Mr Chair.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Fennell.
That's why I was making the comment in relation to it's good to see this as work in progress. May not have been my exact words, but in consultation with other councils and going to the industry as well, because I know we've just spoken about risk matrix and that type of thing. The risk there is always a risk with anything we do. It's how we control that. I mean, this is why the workshops or the consultation is important, because you would have to factor in there, are there caveats? Are there bank securities that can be held? You know, what is the formula to use to minimise our risk? In fact, as far as I'm concerned, our risk should be eliminated if we're going to facilitate such a process. Because what I'm talking about is facilitating the process to allow development to take place, but not actually be the bank as such long term. So that's where it's a combination between the risk factor or the risk matrix and how this is dressed up. I mean, you put lipstick on a pig, it's still a pig. So if it's not developed in the right manner and our protections aren't in place, well, no, I certainly wouldn't support it. So that's where I talk about the consultation and getting it right before we put it out there.
Okay, well, I'm sure that'll be a question answered in the options. Okay, any further questions, comments? If not, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Item 7, extension on drought relief assistance. Recommended that Council extend the drought relief assistance until 31 December 2020, at which time Council will consider further drought assistance should conditions remain unchanged or worsen. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Seconded, Councillor Keenan. Any questions, comments?
Through you, Chair. We were advised this morning via a staff member that we had 3 more applications this week.
3 more applications for water filling station keys, and 2 of those were granted under the assistance package, bringing the total to 27 that are currently receiving drought assistance. Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, well, it's good to see it's being utilised anyway. All right. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Item 8, lost time injury statistics 2019-20. Recommendation that the quarterly statistics report on lost time injuries for 2019-20 financial year to date be received and noted. Have a mover. Thank you, Councillor Braid. Seconded, Councillor Meyer. Questions? No questions. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Item 9, council meeting schedule 2020. Recommendation that council endorse the schedule of meetings dates for 2020 as follows. I think you can read them all there. Someone like to move that? Councillor Casual, Councillor Fennell. There was just a little thing there, if I may. That the date of the October meeting be moved backwards to the 30th of October.
Yeah, that was wrong. There's a paragraph and a half there of information that's completely wrong.
Oh, apologise.
I'd say it was copied from last.
That might have been this year's, where we had it on the 30th, but it should be the 28th. It should be the 28th of October.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Apologies.
So we'll amend that paragraph to reflect what the actual dates are.
Will there be cool water at your end in April?
Well, and our we certainly look forward to a good representation at Riverina. I think our last time we were at Riverina, if it hadn't been for Councillor Conkey, we wouldn't have had a quorum. So we would like to see everybody make the effort to get out to our constituent councils. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Item 10, customer water usage and attitude survey. Recommendation that the board receive and note the report on the preliminary results of the customer water usage and attitude survey, noting a comprehensive analysis will be provided at the February meeting. Someone move that way? Councillor Meyer. Councillor Braid? Questions?
Quick comment, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Fennell.
I found when reading the awareness of water restrictions jumping out at me reinforced our point. I think we discussed it at the last board meeting, that I don't think a lot of people are aware of our restrictions and what they are and what they mean, etc., and what's conducted. In fact, since then, I think I've rung the General Manager twice just to report a couple of businesses, just to give them a call to say, look, they're not aware, watering at the wrong times. So I found that reinforced that point, and actually put a tangible number on that fact. So it is good to do those surveys sometimes and not just fly by the seat of your pants, I think.
No, that's good, and it threw up some interesting things. That you're right. And also, it was surprising that it was in the minority that actually thought we should go to stronger restrictions. And I guess there's a little bit of self-preservation in that, but it's. Does anyone else like to comment on those? Councillor Keenan?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it is interesting that it's in a minority, but that's when presented with a choice, I suppose. And given, it's very interesting to note that the The most popular selection for people was the recycling of wastewater for parks and gardens. That can certainly make a big difference, and the onus of that is on the councils, on the general purpose councils. So it's something that's certainly worth further exploration, and also just a general comment that I think it's great that we're not only sort of surveying the customer satisfaction but getting those community attitudes. I think that's really important and can assist us in our getting those attitudes to the strategic directions that we have, particularly in relation to water conservation.
Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, I suppose on the timing of water restrictions and when we can water and that, and Councillor Fennell mentioned a couple of businesses, I think a lot of people find it hard to understand, because if you drive from Wagga down the South Australian border, you'll see centred pivots going all day long. And then we say to them, well, you've got to water between dusk and dawn or whatever it is. And I think there's a confusion there. Somehow we've got to get the message that this is our situation, this is what you've got to do, irrespective of what other people do. It's our regulations, and we're trying to make those regulations.
Wouldn't see much of that on the New South Wales side of the border.
You drive between Albury and Corowa and your eyes will pop out of your head any day of the week.
And I guess I know we will come under increasing pressure, I think, to introduce some sort of restrictions if the weather doesn't break. And it might be appropriate, Mr. General Manager, that for our February meeting, that maybe we need to just cost, if we went to the next level of restrictions, what impact that may have on our projected revenue, which again could impact what rate we set for the coming financial year. So, yes, Councillor Fennell.
If I could just make one further comment that's come out of this conversation, Mr. Chair, in relation to the general purpose councils and the treated water. It should be noted that Wagga City Council has already started that project. I mean, and this is also something very important for our constituent councils to know, but also it's interesting from that survey of people talking about recycling water. The general public, the high majority of public wouldn't be aware that we currently, Wagga City, Wagga proper, currently pumps 3,500 megs a year back into the river, of which we get no credit for. We have to pay to do that, and that's after we've treated it. The project we've undertaken, which some of us have worked on for up to 6 or 7 years and have finally got to this point, whilst instigated eventually by the Lake Albert situation, it'll be between $18 and $20 million, but that's to bring the water to Category A, which is drinkable. And I know everyone curls their lips up a little bit at that, but it is done throughout the world and can be done. I don't have to drink it because I've got my own water supply, so I can get away with it. But the point is, 3,500 megs, that is we know through our volumes of water that we supply as Riverina water. If that went back into the system, even if it was Category B and used on parks and gardens and recreation, rather than actually dumped in the river where there is no credit, it's not even taken in consideration under the Murray-Darling Basin Plan as far as environmental water. There's no contribution. The whole thing, of course, is a furphy. I'm not getting on my soapbox here, Mr. Chair. I'm just stating that the general public are not aware of this. And if you added up all our councils and all our treatment plants, and if there was actually investment into that, even if it was put into the river, at least someone else can use it. But the point is there is enough water in the system. It's how it's managed. And call it education, call it whatever you like. This is what's needed to be put out there. And I guess as a water authority, it should be a government authority that puts that message out there, but maybe we have to take the bit between the teeth and put that message out there and get the public behind it, because perhaps that might push uphill to upper levels of government to say, well, maybe we need to start looking at this and investing in these infrastructure areas, because there is massive amounts of water just put back into rivers and streams that are not accounted for, not credited. In relation to Councillor Quinn's comments, Not wanting to contradict you, Mr Chair, but yes, the pivots are running flat out because those that are on bore water, because it's basically high security. Corn crops growing all over the place around me even. That said, Councillor Quinn, you're right about the education of people. You can't put that amount of water out through a pivot overnight. That's the problem. That's why they do run day and night, but that's a water delivery thing. I'll leave it to that, Mr Chair, but I just think the treated water is a big issue that we need to get on top of and get out in the public.
Good. Councillor Keenan?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Just to follow up on Councillor Fennell's comments and to put that into perspective with the 3,500 megs, that for those that aren't familiar with the terms of volume and the like, that the reservoir that we opened this morning is 4.5 megs. So that might put things into perspective for people about the amount of water that's going back in.
Yes, no, that's been brought to my attention on many occasions by Councillor Kendall when we were on the Local Water Advisory Committee. Okay.
Mr. Chair, do you want to talk about water restrictions now or in number 11?
I thought maybe 11.
Okay.
Thank you. Pat?
Through you, Chair.
I'll wait till 11 too.
Councillor, Mr General Manager.
Yeah, just a bit more context. Ideally, we would have brought the detailed report and the presentation by the company to this meeting, but we're time constrained today. So I think the timing's working out reasonably well in terms of we've given you a heads up on the high level results. We'll having a 30 or 40 minute session with the company will really get our heads in the space and inform the debate on the next item as well in terms of water restrictions. So we were conscious of that but made that decision not to cram today's agenda. The other comment I'd make is Josh and I have been talking at length about we've now adopted a community engagement strategy, and it's abundantly clear, and this survey reinforced it, that there's a big degree of lack of awareness of what's allowed and not allowed at the moment. And the other quick anecdote I'll give you is that the journalist today, in interviewing me, said, so apart from rainfall filling this reservoir, how do you fill it? And really, so he's a 28, 29-year-old gen, whatever, thinks that we fill it up through rainfall. So we've got a long way to go. And so I had to tell him, we pump it from West Wagga, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, but I say that seriously because people don't comprehend how the water system operates, and they don't have to know that detail, but I thought that was pretty naive.
Okay. Thank you. I'll put that. All those in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Item 11. I'll probably get a better understanding of that when we open our new water treatment plant. Recommendation that the board note the information in the report and note that the General Manager and Director of Engineering are delegated authority to implement and revoke water restrictions by virtue of the provisions of Policy 2.6 Water Restrictions Policy. B, make provision in the 2021 Delivery Plan to commence a review of the 2012 Drought Management Plan and the 2012 Demand Management Plan. And C, receive a further report on amending the water restriction policy at the April 2020 meeting, which will be informed by the results of the Water Conservation Survey presentation at the February meeting of the board. Do I have a mover? Councillor Keenan. Second it? Councillor Meyer. Now, I'll open that up for questions and debate. Councillor Congy.
Yeah, I might as well start. I have received a letter from the Minister for Water, dated the 5th of December. Did we receive a copy of that letter?
Yes.
So have we all received that? She's just talking about the situation in New South Wales, critical water shortages. I know we don't have that, but I think Councillor Fennell mentioned at our last meeting that we need to give a clear message to people about how precious water is. Later on in our report, we talk about our aquifer and that the levels have dropped. So there's something serious happening here. My neighbour, I just hate to see water being wasted, and yet I see water even this morning running down the gutter into the stormwater system. I think we need to send a clear message to people who are our clients that it is a precious resource, that we treat it seriously, that we really need to impose some more restrictions than what we have at the moment. The restrictions we only have at the moment are no watering before 8, after 8, and no watering before 5. And I think we need to send a much stronger message to our constituents
Actually,
concerning
between
that.
10 and 5.
10 and 5 is whatever it happens to be. But and I'm in favour of getting that message out there. I don't think we've got that message out there as clearly as we should, and we just need to send a very, very clear message to people that we need to preserve water. Just because we've got water doesn't mean to say we should be wasting water. Where that leaves me, I don't know whether we should have odds and evens. I've talked to a number of other mayors and councils around this state, as you're probably aware. Armidale and Tamworth, no fixed hoses whatsoever. They use buckets. Orange, I think they're allowed to water 1 hour every Sunday. That's some pretty tight restrictions there. I'm not suggesting in any way, shape or form that we do that here. But at the same time, I think we need to tighten our measures up, and we need to implement some form of extra water restrictions to show that we're serious, and that we appreciate that there's a critical shortage of water throughout this state, and we're doing our bit.
Thank you, Councillor Conkey. Councillor Meyer.
I would like to support Councillor Conkey, Mr Chairman, in the sense that we talk about drought. We're only seeing the start of it here in terms of other places in the state. And I think to protect ourselves, we probably should be taking a firmer stance in terms of what we do. And maybe we've got to set an example. If we're asking the public to water after 5 and before 8 of the morning, we probably should curtail some of the watering that councils do during the day in sports fields and parks and whatever. I don't know the solution, but I've been through droughts, and I've been through worse droughts than what we're experiencing at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Meyer. Councillor Fennell.
I agree and disagree with different elements of both debates. Putting tighter restrictions on something, I mean, if Councillor Conkey's neighbour has got water running down the street, you can put all the restrictions on you like. It's not going to stop them putting the water on running down the street. They shouldn't be doing that now. So by saying, well, you can't do this, can't do that, they're obviously ignorant or whatever and are going to do it anyway. So it's the enforcement of compliance is one of the issues. That said, no, we shouldn't be wasting water. If we have a resource and if our levels are supportable, there's no reason to put an impost on someone because someone's suffering 1,000 kilometres away. I mean, why? It's a bit like, you know, I actually probably can't give you the proper analogy here, Mr Chair, but the point is if we have the resource and it's sustainable, that's what this is always about. It's about sustainability. Yes, the aquifers have dropped, but the aquifers drop every summer. I can give you measurements of mid-Murrumbidgee right now. It has dropped about 1.1 metres in the last 18 months. The drawdowns have increased by about 4%. That is actually standard for any summer. The static water level right now on the mid-Murrumbidgee is 8.9 metres. Its standard is 8 metres. You can see the water. We know this. What's happening now is not unusual. It is absolutely standard. It is prolonged, yes. So if we have sustainability within our aquifers, if we are delivering our water from our aquifers and haven't tapped into our surface water, because that's where the other cities are running into problems. They don't have the aquifer water, they have surface water, they don't have storage. You're correct, whoever said Orange is on 1 bucket or 1 hour a week, because my son lives there and I know only too well he can't water his garden, it's all dead. But just because someone else is suffering doesn't mean we should punish our own people. And that's what it comes down to. We're going to make our constituents go without, even though they have a resource. That's assuming we have the resource. So what we need before we actually make that decision is an informed position to say, here's where our water levels are at, here's our forecast usage, here's our historical usage in similar circumstances. I mean, we went through the millennium drought only 10 years ago, for 10 years. Councillor Meyer is right, he's been through worse droughts than this, as have I. Grew up in a town that used to run out of water. So before we all go and virtue signal and jump out there and beat our chest and say, well, let's go to level 2 or level 3 water restrictions, how about we actually enforce compliance? And that's why a simple couple of phone calls to the General Manager, who made a couple of subtle phone calls, I assume, to those particular businesses. And it's interesting, whichever councillor brought up about the fact of our councils watering. I hang my head in shame as a Wagga City councillor when I drive into town from a farm and find the sprinklers going in the Victory Memorial Gardens and all around the city in the middle of the day, as recent as last week. And it's been brought to the attention of our General Manager. So I think before we get on that bandwagon, I'm not saying we shouldn't if the numbers aren't there. But before we start heading down that path, let's get our own constituent councils' backyards in order. Let's get the message out there. The surveys show people aren't aware of even level 1 water restrictions. Let's get out there, get that done and really hammer it. And if that doesn't stack up before the February board meeting, you've got my full support to say, righto, no holds barred.
Thank you, Councillor Fennell. Councillor Burke.
Yeah, I'm of the similar opinion. I think Riverina Water's built a business that charges the clientele. If you're going to cut back that business is supplying, you're going to cut back the charges that that they're paying. If we can service the clients, that's what we're about. We can't help anyone else's situation. It's about infrastructure. They need more infrastructure. We've got it. It gives a reason for people to come to these areas and live, because it's a positive for the area that you do have the facilities and you can cater through severe droughts because of good management and planning over the past years. So I think by putting on restrictions, that would only happen if we are restricted to access water ourselves. Otherwise, you have a duty to your customers and your clientele to provide services, but there's nothing wrong, and I think as a water council that we need to provide options, techniques for better usage of their water, and that's only sensible practice. But while we have the ability, nut growers, irrigators, whoever has water, if I've got an extra 200 megalitres water, I'm going to use it. That's my right. And it's the same as this business and anyone else's. So my opinion is that unless it's needed from our own resources, we probably shouldn't employ any further restrictions, because when it does rain and it floods, no one is going to be able to subsidise Riverina Water for the loss of sales in those periods as well.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Just as an aside, is Federation Council imposing any restrictions? No. No, right. I'd like to hear from all the councils. Councillor Braid, do you have any comment?
I think...
Turn your mic on, please, Councillor.
I think we need to... sorry.
Just there, Eva.
Yep. I think we need to know what our position is, because there are a hell of a lot of people that do know, and we're only making ourselves look stupid if we don't do what we've got.
Thank you. Councillor Koschel.
I'm sort of somewhere in the middle between both of them here at the moment, because it's I can see both sides, and I agree with Councillor Fennell's comments that talking to people around town and through the survey, there's actually a lot of people, when they find out that you're on the board of Riverina Water, will talk to them about ask you why we're currently not on restrictions, and then when you talk to them about that we are on restriction, what's a part of it. So I think a lot of it at the moment is the education piece, which I know the survey was a really good part of, and actually, and I've seen the social site, but it's still, I don't think it's had the impact locally to how much or what the actual, that we are on restrictions. People think that's pretty much we can do what we want at the moment. So, but also, again, I agree with Councillor Fennell's comments in regards to, it's a resource that we do have, and what we do here probably isn't going to change what's happening a lot further up north from here. So I think it's somewhere that we need to look at in the middle, but I think it's around us tidying up our own backyard first as well, and creating that education piece before we do just go that next step further to ensure that people are actually on board with the current stages of water restrictions.
Thank you. Councillor Quinn?
Mr Chairman, I support Councillor Fennell's comments and Councillor Burke's. In the Wagga area and the Albury-Wodonga area, there's an enormous amount of people go hungry every day of the week. If I was to eat and my family was to eat burnt toast every day of the week, it wouldn't make the slightest difference. We have the availability at this stage of very good water, and we can put on some sort of information to the people to use less water, but to go any further, we not only shoot ourselves in the foot, but we could make our business very poor down the track.
Yeah.
Before I have any more comments, Mr Director of Engineering, would you like to make a comment?
See me chomping at the bit, Mr Chairman, waiting for that invitation. I'll make a couple of statements. We are not on water restrictions. We are currently on a permanent water conservation measure, and the aim of that is to ensure that people don't waste water. I acknowledge that message is not being delivered particularly well at present, and we do have some work to do in that area. As far as our supply goes, there is no reason from a supply point of view for us to put restrictions on. Blowering and Burrinjuck are currently at levels that are normal for this time of year. Our aquifer is, whilst slightly down, not abnormally. We monitor, bores in all of the aquifers that we use. Recharge is down, usage is about the same, so that's where the dips come from. But as one of the councillors mentioned, if we get a normal winter, then we expect that to come back up again. If I were to be asked for a recommendation, I would be saying there is no supply reason or delivery reason from our infrastructure to apply water restrictions. The only justification council could have to apply restrictions is on a feel-good measure. I'll also add that our take of the water is less than 1% of what goes down the river. So our community could stop using water altogether, and it would make virtually no difference to people downstream from us.
Could I just add one figure to that?
Well, just a moment.
Sorry.
Has everyone else had it? Councillor
It was only so as for their input in relation to an actual number for the recharge.
Sure, but we use that to say that we would have no impact on climate change because we only produce 1.5% of the.
I was just going to give a recharge figure for perspective as to what the Director of Engineering was stating. Oh, sorry. It was only to give an actual number for the recharge figure that he was talking about, the aquifer in a normal winter. The actual modelling is 135,000 megalitre recharge on our aquifer. Allocate all full allocation, not just for Riverina or the entire aquifer of extraction, is 52,000 megalitres. So you can actually have 2 years of no rain, or actually 2.3 years, 2 2/3 years of zero rain before the aquifer would actually run out. So that, just to put that in perspective, so the aquifer is actually quite safe under the recharge under the current numbers.
Well, we certainly don't want to get to a zero aquifer.
Oh, of course not.
Councillor Keenan.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I think there's been some really valid points that have been raised right across the board, so to speak, that everyone's, given me some extra things to think about, which is good. I fully support making sure that we make an informed decision when we do reach that point, if we do reach that point, and we have whatever data and information that we can to hand as a part of that. I'm also really supportive of enforcement and compliance. I think that that's something that we really need to do, and I think there's an expectation from the community that that if people aren't complying with what's being put there out in relation to any restrictions and the like, that is something that they're held account to. I think that we're certainly having that conversation with the community and as a board about whether we should introduce any restrictions or not is essential. Generally speaking, I think that we do have a responsibility, even though we're not. It will make very little impact overall. I think you can have some similar arguments when there are some similar arguments and the like that comes into play. It reminds me of the parallels with things around waste management. That gone are the days where we put everything into landfill. That we do a number of activities to get away from that, regardless of whether you have the space or not. It's recognising that it's not an infinite resource. I think some words before about it being a precious resource is really important, and that it has a value. So it's about changing that community attitude. Councillor Conkey's comments about water running down the drain, we need people to look at that as dollars running down the drain, and to understand that, if not from environmental perspective, then at least from a financial perspective. But yeah, as I said, I think there's been some really valid comments right across the board that we've got some further in-depth conversations to happen.
One of the issues with compliance is they are conservation measures, they're not restrictions. And therefore, we would have to nearly impose some restrictions before we could enforce it. I noticed that Hilltops Council introduced, I think, the ban on watering from 9 till 6. Now, I think our 10 till 5 is probably a bit too lenient. Given the time, I accept that we have sufficient water resources there to meet our needs, but I'm also very aware of perception that that we should also be, I guess, seen to be doing the right thing in respect. We're not, even if we extended the conservation hours from 10 till 5 till 8 till 6 or something, I think would be a reasonable start, and that's a voluntary conservation measure. And of course the other one is you can use a sledgehammer and put your water costs up and make sure that they do appreciate it as a precious reserve. We sit in the bottom 10 percentile in the state as for water charges. If we were to charge what Sydney Water charge for their water, I'm sure people mightn't let so much run down, but we don't want to get to that stage because that impacts a lot of people. So I think the point that we need a fairly clear and concise picture of where we're at is good, but I don't think we should shy away from imposing some additional measures ourselves. Councillor Conkey?
Amendment.
You may.
I probably know where it's going to go, but I want it on the public record anyway. And my amendment is Part A, that the board note the information in the report and note that the information in the report, full stop, and B, this council proceed to level 1 water restrictions, or stage 1 restrictions.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Keenan.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Certainly.
Sorry, just to get some clarification, because we were talking before about it's not enforceable because it's conservation measures. Why do we call it a ban then if it's not enforceable?
Mr. Director?
A ban on fixed sprinklers.
I'll put you on the spot.
No, I'm happy to answer it. There's sort of two parts to that. One, it's about water conservation and not wasting water. That's something that we should educate our customers on all year round, drought or no drought. As I think you might have mentioned before, it's both a financial matter and a precious resource. We want every drop to be used rather than wasted. From an enforcement point of view, we don't want to go down the path of being heavy-handed when what we're trying to do is educate people. Secondly, Riverina Water has no authorised person to enforce it. So we haven't in the past. Generally what we've done when we've had restrictions in the past or water conservation measures, we've sent a letter, delivered a letter personally and said, this is your second time we've had to come and talk to you. And generally 99 times out of 100 people do the right thing. I forget which councillor said our biggest problem is councils. I'll be honest, it's not residential users. So
so what do we do about that?
On my drive back from the opening this morning, I pulled in and spoke to Wagga City Council staff at the netball courts about why they're running sprinklers at 10:20, and I'll be making a phone call this afternoon to somebody about some awareness.
Excuse me, Councillor Fennell. Councillor Conger, do you want to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I'll speak to the motion. Look, I think we've been around the table and I probably know where this is going to end up, but I think we do we do need to send a clear message. I think leaving it until February is way too late. We need to make a decision now. All the forecast is it's going to be a pretty hot summer, despite the fact this week it's going to be 44 degrees anyway. But I think we need to get a clear message across. Stage 1 is not difficult. If you compare our stage 1 with a lot of most of the other places in the state, it's really just it's not difficult to impose that at all. I think people can water every second day. It's not going to change. They're still going to use the same amount of water. They'll probably use double the amount of water on every second day than what they would if they used it every day. So I just think that we need, as a water county council, to send a clear message and to do the right and responsible thing.
Thank you. Speaker against? Councillor Fennell.
As I stated in my debate earlier, to send a message, as far as I'm concerned, it's virtue signalling. I know that's the modern day word. I just think it's a great term, and it's the only one I can come up with at the moment. Historically, if you look back over numbers, going back decades, when water restrictions come in, and for rightly so, I'm not against water restrictions in general, do not get me wrong. But you see people actually then, there's this ability or this habit of then actually wasting water because they get out and they water and they water and they water. I've seen people actually drown plants. You see water running down streets everywhere. It gets wasted because all of a sudden there seems to be a mindset in people's head that we're on water restrictions, we better water to hell. And the numbers are actually there. You could go through the Riverina water usage numbers over the years and you'll see a spike in certain areas of this consumption. Whereas all I ever hear in the media, in council, everywhere, we've got to educate people, I mean, I don't know how you educate people. Some people just can't be educated. But in this case, we have the resource. Yes, it's precious. There's enough in the system. We've spoken ad nauseum about different aspects of this regarding pumping water into rivers, out of rivers, wastage, etc. We've just heard our biggest problem is our own councils. I mean, to punish someone to make yourself feel good is just nonsense as far as I'm concerned. And that's what it's doing. But in relation to this, what I would be fully supportive of, and I'll put it into my debate and finish it as a question, is the conservation process extended fully. I am happy to extend that from 8 to 6. I'm happy to, if it means in releasing some further resources so that Riverina Water can, it's been explained we can't enforce compliance, but to administer to that, go around and educate our councils with a cricket bat if necessary and say, will you turn these sprinklers off? That's what's needed. But seriously, so I'll leave it with what is the mechanism then to extend the period? Can we do that here and now? Can we just make it a further amendment to this motion to make it 8 to 6? What does the General Manager need? I don't care if it's done via email after this meeting. I'm open to suggestions. So obviously I'll be voting against this amendment, but happy to look at further measures.
Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if there's a further amendment that the that Councillor Conkey might be willing to take into consideration that we, and I'm happy for some wordsmithing on it, but that Riverina Water write to our contributing councils and to lobby them to improve their water management practice, and note that the concerns around the water conservation measures, something along those lines, that if that, as an addition to your amendment, Councillor Conkey, would you be
Happy to wordsmith that as a,
Yep.
Whatever it is.
as an addition to?
D. Our councils, sorry, right to our councils along those lines that you've mentioned, pointing out that they should comply with some of these recommendations that have been put forward. I don't know how we wordsmith that, but somebody can wordsmith that for us.
Mr General Manager.
Through you, Chair. No need to put that in the motion, we'll just do it anyway. I was going to... Yeah, it makes sense. We can do that pretty quickly. The Chairman and myself are meeting with the 4 GMs and mayors during February, and we'll reinforce that by presenting the letter again. My only other comment, in reviewing the water restriction policy and understanding your desire for the motion to be meaningful and be able to be implemented, could I suggest that the wording of the amendment be that Council direct the General Manager to implement level 1 water restrictions given the prevailing weather conditions across the state? Because at the moment, myself and the Director can only impose stage 1 when the trigger points are reached.
Okay.
So I want to use some language around that directs me. I also think, thinking out loud here, is that we should amend the policy to give, in the future, to provide a clause that allows the board to unilaterally impose water restrictions, gives you that power, well, wording to that effect, because at the moment, your ability for us to pass a motion and impose water restrictions, it'd be pretty difficult to do procedurally. That's why I'm proposing the wording I am, Chair. Because reviewing the policy now, you can't actually, without amending the policy, go to stage 1. They can direct. Yep. In accordance with the policy.
Mr Chairman, if I could just make a quick comment, and as we've been over because of the business we have, personally I would prefer to look at, we've spoken about free access to standpipes and helping people, because we have a good business, rather than bring on restrictions at this stage. Why don't we look at other opportunity to help people that are in real need of water and shortage in our area? And there may be such things as like that we can add to other than standpipes, and that will hit where it's really hurting, rather than put the restrictions on everyone.
Okay, I've had two speakers for and 2 speakers against. Now, does anyone want to speak for the motion? Councillor Keane again.
I was a question I had before, it wasn't debate. Thank you, Mr Chair. I think it's a good point Councillor Burke raises, and I think why not both? I can't see why we can't look at doing that as well. I think it's also important to remember that what's being proposed is that that really we're talking about encouraging people to water 4 days a week instead of 7 days a week. And when we talk about, we've been speaking all morning around water conservation and getting the message out to community, and that would be one of the key messages when we talk about water conservation to the community, is not to water every day, and to essentially water in line with what is being proposed with the stage 1 restrictions. That is the only difference, is instead of being 5 to 10 fixed sprinklers, not outside the 10 to 5, that we're proposing that, well, what is being proposed is that fixed hoses and sprays 5 p.m. to 10 a.m, so overnight essentially, 3 days per week and once on a weekend. And then with fixed sprinklers that it's the same. So we're not talking about people needing to bring buckets into their showers and the like, that this is pretty minor and wouldn't barely rate as an inconvenience for a lot of people. But I tell you what, you want to make the community aware of how to conserve water, then I can't think of a better way to do it. Also, just to suggest that if this is something that does go forward, whether amending the policy or not, that a time frame be put on that.
Thank you. So, speaker against?
Against the...
Motion? The amendment?
I have a question, Mr Chair.
Question? Councillor Fennell.
It has always been my understanding that there is a policy that governs the implementation of water restrictions. So that is the second part to this, which I was going to debate about, but I'll ask the question first. If that is the policy, my understanding, is it correct we don't have the authority to overrule the policy to direct you to do so? Is that correct? To impose water restrictions?
Well, part C was on amending the water restriction policy at the 2020 meeting.
Yeah, that's next year.
Okay. True, you're right. Under the current policy, only the General Manager and the Director of Engineering can impose restrictions. Now, the board is, what the amendment says is directing the General Manager to implement those restrictions. Now, whilst you may say that contravenes the policy, I would think that if the board, in its wisdom, decided that we should have, and I'm sure the director will say there's good reasons why we shouldn't have it, but you know, in my learned opinion is that the board directs the policy of Riverina Water. So really what we need to do is vote on this amendment and to see whether it gets up. Otherwise, if it doesn't get up, the rest of it is pure speculation.
I understand that. Just a follow-up question, Mr. Chair. I understand all that, Mr. Chair. My point is, how do we, and I'm not saying in the future that we don't amend the policy, etc., or whatever, but rather than policy on the run, if the policy which states there are trigger points, I guess that's the little bit I left out, how can the director and the general manager, whether we instruct them or not, if we haven't reached those trigger points, and that's what the policy says, and we go through this in local government all the time, we can't breach policy whether we're a board or not. We are bound. So I'm not actually arguing for or against here, I'm actually arguing on a procedural issue. I'm not disagreeing with you on the basis that, well, we are the board, so we should have the authority to do so. But if the policy doesn't allow us today to do so, because there are measures, there's actually trigger points.
Then I suggest you vote against the amendment.
Oh, I will be, but I just wanted to check on the procedural process there.
And we can address that in item C. Mr. General Manager.
The short answer to your question is no, you can't pass a resolution that directs us, that despite my efforts to word something up to reach the intent of what the amendment seeks to do, there's no way legally, it will come down to legally that we can circumvent the existing policy. Would you share that view, Bede?
Okay. So,
we can still vote.
Councillor
Sorry, then, Mr. Chair, then, sorry, the wording that should be that we encourage the request the General Manager and the Director to consider.
to encourage the General Manager and Director for the imposition of stage 1.
That's right.
Okay. You seconded that? Right. No, that's an amendment. The amendment, I think we've had sufficient speakers for and against. I'm going to ask the mover if he'd like to summarise, and we'll put it to the vote.
I don't have right of reply. The mover of the original motion has right of reply.
No, we're voting on the amendment.
That's correct, but the motion, the person who moves the original motion has the right of reply for all amendments.
Right. Who was the mover of the original motion?
Vanessa.
Sorry?
Vanessa.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Keenan, yes.
more than. I won't say too much. As you said, I think everything's been covered. I don't think that. I think it's going to give everybody something to think about going forward, regardless of the outcome of the vote on this. But I do. As I said, I don't think it's asking too much of the community, and it's a heck of a lot it's a very significant and effective way to communicate that the preciousness of water as a resource. So I commend the motion to the board to consider, and also, regardless of the outcome, that the executive put some thought into considerations moving forward.
So just to be clear, we are voting on the amendment, that we encourage the General Manager and Director of Engineering to implement Stage 1 water restrictions. Those in favour raise their hand. Those against? Motion is lost. The amendment is lost. Now, the motion as stands has a mover and a seconder. Is there any further questions on the rest of that motion?
The motion to use the right of reply, so that you just got to put it to the vote.
Thank you. I was just giving anyone that they would like an opportunity. Okay. Okay.
That's
thank
not
you,
entirely correct, Mr Chair, as you know, that it's back to the motion. So anyway.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 12, request to support the South Wagga Rotary Nepalese project.
So moved, Mr Chair.
Sorry?
So moved, Mr Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Burke? Right. Questions? Right. You've all read it. You're aware that they asked for 5,000. We're offering 3.5.
I was actually happy to amend it to provide the 5, being such a worthwhile project, but I'm happy to have discussion or advice from the operations in relation to that before we do so, Mr Chair. I just thought it might come up in debate before we need to put it back up again.
Did you want to move an amendment?
Well, all right, I will. I'll move an amendment to put it back to the 5,000 that was originally...
What about an adjustment to the recommendation, Mr Chair?
Yeah. Sorry?
What about a simple adjustment to the recommendation? I think it'll be favourable anyway.
I'm open to... okay, the mover's happy to put it to the 5.
The mover and the second are happy to move it to 5?
Okay, well, I don't think there's any further debate from me required.
All right, that's available. All right, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. That'll make them very happy, I'm sure. Right. Item 13, adoption of policy 1.25 donations policy. Recommendation that council notes there were 3 submissions received during the exhibition period for the draft policy 1.25 donations policy, and B, adopt policy 1.25 donations policy. I have a mover. Councillor Keenan, seconded Councillor Quinn. Questions? Councillor Keenan.
Thanks, Mr Chair. And I'm not sure whether I might move an amendment to my own recommendation. And I do realise it has been out on exhibition. First question is, did we get, I think it says that they were attached, the submissions. Did we get those? Because I just wanted to see they were in relation to the clarification of the categories. There were 3 submissions received. I'm just trying to find the line.
It's in the opening paragraph, Councillor Keenan.
Is it? Yeah.
Yes.
It wasn't. It wasn't my intent to provide copies of the submissions, because since the writing of the report, we received no further submissions, and I was simply outlining the content
No, that's fine. I'm just wondering whether it might be covering off on what I might cover off on, which is just in relation to the, it's not the eligibility, but the donation categories. Just noting that there isn't necessarily one there that would cover things such as water conservation or along those lines, that whether if that's something that we do want to identify as a category. So this is on page 4 of 7 of the policy, page 57 of the digital document.
Would there be more in our community grants?
But if people are seeking donations in relation to in relation to activities that they might be doing in that area, that I'm just putting it out there as for consideration. That is that something that we want to acknowledge, or we're happy with sticking with cultural, social, or arts, sporting, or healthy lifestyle orientated, or education and learning. Could potentially fall under one of those categories, but I think the point is to make it clear what the categories are.
So we're going out on further public exhibition, are we not?
No, this is the adoption of the policy, I think,
No,
is it?
proposing adoption, unless I only recommend it, yeah, sorry.
It's
Question,
not
Mr.
the end of the
Chairman.
world, but just for consideration, do we want to identify it?
Councillor Meyer?
Simple question, Mr. Chairman. I've been through this scenario of trying to sell the community development grants, and you know the result of that. The general manager was placed in a position a couple of days ago of somebody ringing up and wanting to apply for one of those community grants after it's all been done and dusted. In respect of these grants or these things, can we write to all those people who have been using this money without simply cutting them off? Can we write to them and say, look, if you don't apply, this is going to happen? I'm just trying to make it simple.
No, I think that was the intent, that we would, all those who have been regular receivers of
Thank you.
community Riverina donations or sponsorship, that the new rules will be communicated to them. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. All right, so did you want to amend that, Councillor Keenan, or are you happy to?
I think I do, Mr. Chair, looking at the definition of donation in the policy. So it's talking about it being an altruistic arrangement in which Riverina Water provides a contribution to support a program, service or event in the Riverina Water supply area without specific benefits to Riverina Water. So yeah, if someone's, if a non-profit group is looking to undertake some kind of works that they're looking for Riverina Water to donate, either in kind or a service or some kind of monetary contribution, then at the moment I don't think it would be covered by this policy as a donation. So I think I would like to move it as an amendment, just to make sure that it is included. Yeah, yeah, addition, sorry, rather than an amendment to my...
Addition,
Yeah.
okay. This, the second, are you okay with that?
And also just a tiny point, Mr. Chair, on behalf of Greater Hume Shire, I'd just like to note that their map still does not have Henty on it.
I did notice that. I didn't think it correct. I brought it up.
Thank you.
Henry's been lost.
All right, with that, I'll put that.
Thanks.
All those in favour, say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We can't forget Henty.
Through you, Chair, the source map has been updated, and I apologise for the inclusion of this map.
Item 14, Draft Policy 2.4, Deferred Payments for Rural Extensions. Recommend that Council adopt the revised Policy 2.4, Deferred Payments for Rural Extensions.
Mr. Chair, so moved, but I'd like to discuss an issue.
Sorry?
So moved, but there may be a slight change coming.
Okay. Seconder, Councillor Casual. Councillor Fennell.
Yes, policy in general I've no issue with, but particularly given we've been discussing water, we've been discussing drought, any number of things, and I do understand from an administrative point of view works under $10,000, but given the current economic climate, I can assure you, of the rural sector, $10,000 may not seem a lot, $5,000 may not seem a lot to people in this room, but I can assure you There are hundreds and hundreds of people out there, particularly in rural areas, and I'm sure some of my fellow councillors here from constituent councils that are more agri-centred than Wagga, whilst they're not coming in droves to want to extend their rural supply, I know of some that would like to tap into water because they don't have any water. But I can guarantee you they couldn't scratch together $5,000 or $7,000 or $8,000 in a hurry to hook it up. And I will take advice from operations as far as, is it an administrative problem? What is it? But I do believe we need to amend that to extend it to works less than $10,000. We're not talking about deferring payments for, I always get my terminology back to front, for the actual service. I always get this back to front, but you know what I'm saying? The access fee they have to pay up front. No issue with that. But I can guarantee, so I would like to move this with that change, but I'm happy to have the discussion first before we do that. I'm happy to hear from the General Manager or Director of Engineering or whomever, or my fellow councillors first, before we make that change, or suggest that change.
Councillor Keenan.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Fully supportive.
Sorry, we haven't got a second.
Oh, sorry, we haven't got a second.
Yes, we did. Councillor Koschel.
Yeah.
All right, sorry.
Seconded it, yes.
Mr Chair, just following on from our previous conversations and what was raised by Councillor Burke about ways that we can assist our rural customers that are experiencing drought, I think this is a great way. I completely agree. $5,000 is a lot of money, and for a number of people that cash flow and the like is not great. At the moment, particularly for those that are on the land, so absolutely supportive of the amendment.
If I may just comment, it's probably appropriate this because you may or may not be aware that Lockhart Shire was granted access to up to $1 million under the drought, and the majority of that money is going to be put forward to extending water pipelines to drought-proof more farms in the Lockhart Shire. So, if the federal government see fit to approve that, we would certainly hope that Riverina Water may be a little conciliatory in some of their charges, because we see that drought funding should be there to alleviate the effects of drought. Now, that means extra customers will be coming onto the system, and obviously we've got to do the checks to make sure we've got the sufficient water to be able to get out to them and all those other issues. But you're right, Councillor Fennell, in this time, you know, speaking to a number of farmers who have just sold off all their stock, done all those things because they can't afford to cart water or do those things, it is pretty mind-boggling, you know. You would like to, I'd like to hear from the General Manager or the Director on those issues, but maybe we should hear that before we have any further discussion.
I'm happy to talk to that. So currently the deferment of payment, the deferred payments consists of the DSC and the extension costs, so not the connection costs. With our current DSC charge, it would leave you $1,000 to spend on an extension. So that's why the $10,000 limit exists. It's kind of the base cost that it would cost somebody to extend their water main and get connected into the system. So we can remove that, but I don't anticipate that we would have any applications come forward under $10,000. Do you agree, Bede, or have further?
Yes, I agree. It would be unusual for us to do or to receive an application for less than 10 grand when you add in the connection cost, the DSC, and the actual capital cost of the main. I mean, I think we could lower it to $5,000 without any administrative problems, but there's just no one in that bracket that I'm aware of.
And further to add to that, on the other end of the scale, it's very uncommon to get something under $50,000. A lot of the people that have applied or looked into the scheme, their extension costs are in excess of $50,000.
Councillor Fennell.
Thank you. That's why I wanted to ask the question. I felt there must have been an obvious reason why that number was there. Given that, and I'm not wanting to change things across the board here, and that's why I wanted to discuss this, my argument is still the same, or my debate is still the same about the rural sector and a lot of people struggling, trying to come up with those costs. And is there a mechanism and maybe today's not the day to do it. If we could, that'd be great. To put flexibility in that, because seriously, people are struggling with cash flow, and it's going to be ongoing because, as we know, I mean, yes, Councillor Conkey may have said it's going to be a hot summer. Well, it's hot every summer. Not necessarily unusual. Rains aren't going to come till winter, and so water's going to be an ongoing issue. And what the farmers are saying and the rural sectors are saying, that yes, they've sold their stock, so they don't have an income. And those that need water, I understand about the charges, and we really hesitate going near defer payment on those other charges. But our constituents still can't come up with 10 grand even for those. I appreciate the answer now, that knowing that, well, there's only about $1,000's worth of funding there. Is there a mechanism we can put in there to, this is my word, and delegate authority to the General Manager to look at something on merit or along those lines? Is there something we can do? Because if someone comes cap in hand and says, I need water, I can give you money over the next 12 months or 48 months, whatever it is, or 24 months, whatever it is. I can give you $2 grand now and I can pay the rest off, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm not trying to give you the whole model here. But currently, and again, as we were speaking policy, we can't. The General Manager can't do that. What can we do to assist those people? Because I know we want to help them, but we need to give the parameters and guidance to the General Manager and operations to be able to do so.
General Manager.
Thank you, Chair. I would encourage the board to adopt the updated deferred payment policy as presented. And to address your question, a council can financially assist an individual or an organisation under the Government Act at the moment. And typically that would be via the detailed costings for a project. I have the ability to bring a report to council that says council provide financial assistance to Farmer Joe in the amount of $20,000. We then go through the Act and exhibit that, and council can already make that decision on a case-by-case basis. If we were getting them every month, it'd be an issue. But I would say that the mechanism already exists, and that if you're talking to people who are struggling, that they come and see me or Bede, and we work with them to cost up a project and then bring a report to council that allows us. It's probably a 3 to 4 month process because you exhibit it, and if there's no objections and the board agrees to provide financial assistance in whatever form the report recommends, then that can happen now.
Mr Chair, just for clarity, so if I could ask Councillor Fennell, you're looking at a low interest type loan arrangement with clients?
Yes.
Yep.
If I could put a scenario, I know I'm pushing my luck here with a number of times of speaking, Mr Chair, but to put a scenario, I know there was one that I presented to the General Manager some months ago, which I know is in negotiations with the individual, which I appreciate. I know of others that are really, they're running pipes where they shouldn't be running pipes. I'll leave it at that, because they are out of water. A 3 or 4 month process, I appreciate you've got to go through the process, doesn't help. If it could be done retrospectively, that's great, but I'm trying to give the General Manager the authority, if the board wishes, to say, look, we've got a project here, because some of these jobs might be $8,000 to $10,000, $15,000, but the people don't have it. Their stock need the water now, their houses need the water now. I'm trying to find a mechanism to give the General Manager the authority, as I said, with the blessing of the board, to look at it merit-based. I accept the policy, I accept the point that we have to put a dollar value in now that that's explained. But sometimes these costs that are involved, whether they be for the service charge or head charge or access charge, whatever, if the people don't have the money, they don't have the money.
Maybe we just need a clause there to say that the General Manager has discretion to deal with hardship cases and bring a report to the board.
If we could do that, and I will be quiet. So.
Given the discussion, my preference would be for us to note the comments, Chair, and bring an updated policy to the February meeting.
You'd be okay with that?
I'm willing. I just don't want to make.
No, I'm happy with that.
So,
Mr Chairman, if the General Manager, if in a lot of cases, a lot of these people might be on Centrelink payments of some sort because of hardship, there are nils loans out there, no interest charges. There's a whole lot of loans out there now for all sorts of people, all sorts of predicament, no interest loans. And we could easily tap into them, because the other way is we can't get you can't charge the debt back to the property, can you? Because local government gets first hit of it. We'd be second hit, wouldn't we?
Yes.
We can tie the debt to the property and it's our debt, so we can first hit it.
In settlement.
So, would the mover and the seconder be agreeable to deferring?
Well, either withdraw the motion in lieu of, or it'd be preferable to get an amendment that the report be noted and a further updated policy be presented to the February meeting.
Okay.
I think that would give time.
So who are the original movers and second?
Councillor Fennell and...
Councillor Code, you agreeable to that? Okay. All right.
I don't think we're going to get inundated with applications.
No. All right. Well, I'll put that. All those in favour, say aye. Against, carried. Good. Council resolution sheet, item 15. Recommendation that the information be noted. Somebody move that. Councillor Keenan, Councillor Conkey, any questions? No questions.
Mr Chair, I think the board should commend all those involved in putting the room on. I'd particularly like to thank you for the hearing loop. It's the first time in 8 years I've heard most of the meeting. If you use a microphone, please. And I didn't hear a word you said before because you weren't speaking into the microphone.
Yes, yes. Yes, you can't be shy all your life. Yeah. All right, please, use the microphone. Okay, thank you. I'll put that. All those in favour of item 15, against, carried. Item 1, the Director of Engineering's report, who will cover October and November in one foul swoop. Somebody move? Councillor Koshal, Councillor Burke. Thank you. Mr Director.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yes, I'll go straight to November, which is page 84 on the hub document, if you're all with me. Just point out the number of wet days and rainfall for November was obviously very low. We're seeing the drought or the dry period starting to kick in. Correspondingly, the water used by our communities jumped up to 1,639 megalitres. I'll dwell a little on this graph of Wagga's daily consumption. When I talked earlier about the triggers for restrictions, that there are two. One is the supply and one is the ability to deliver the water. Our ability to deliver water to the community overall is about 90 megalitres per day. So you can see there that over the back end of November, it's increased from around the 30 to 40 megalitres per day up to 60 megalitres per day. So we're still quite well within our capacity to deliver, but that sort of jump is early for the season. So if that trend continues, then I'd expect this week and during January we'll be starting to hit the high 80 megalitres per day on consumption. If we get beyond 90, then that's when the General Manager and myself will have a conversation about our ability to continue to deliver and whether we should impose restrictions then or not. You'll see on cumulative water use, given it's a dry period, our water used to date on the bar graph is well above both last financial years and well above budget. So that's a positive sign from a business perspective for the year. Scrolling down, number of new services. Wagga continues unabated, 24 connections during November. Half of those are at Gobagumlin. Lloyd will be the next one. We've recently put in the mains in the new subdivision at Lloyd. You would have seen from the reservoir site today that higher level blocks are now becoming available, and they're being quite sought after. Had a number of repairs during November. I won't go into detail on those. About the usual number of water quality complaints. Our new water quality supervisor started a couple of weeks ago, Fiona Smith. If any of you have come across her, she was the water quality technician at CSU for the last 10 to 12 years. So she's reasonably well known, certainly well known in our industry. Mains construction, as I said, the connection of the Glen Oak Reservoir was completed, and Lloyd subdivision stages 8 and 9, which are continuing into December. Water filling station activity is increasing, and I think Emily mentioned earlier that we're getting more in our rural ones now, which is, I guess, good. It's good that they're being accessed. Minor fleet disposals, capital works. Generally, we're on par for the year. There are two that I'd like to highlight. One is the RTU tender that we'll be dealing with in a moment. That's a large chunk of the remote telemetry unit item of $500,000. So the actual purchase of the units is half of that amount. The other one was the Kringle Road 600mm ductile. We're finding some difficulties in resourcing the property consultation and land acquisition process. So we've engaged an external person to start that work, but it's going to take longer than we envisaged. So I suspect that we'll be, in February or April, we'll be discussing about deferring that project. That's just an early heads up, that one. We will spend some of it, but certainly won't be the full 650 this financial year. All of the other projects are pretty well on track for the year. Any questions?
Councillors, I don't want to stifle too much discussion, but we are running on a tight time frame.
Just one question.
One short question. Councillor Fennell.
It was in relation to the mains break at the Rock. Is 98 kilolitres correct, that water loss in Hill Street in 4 hours, given it was a 4-hour duration? I just thought it seemed an exorbitant, a large amount. I know it's a large pipe, but...
98 kilolitres. Yep, that would be correct. Yep.
All right, I just felt by comparison. Okay, that's all right.
Thank you. Right. No further questions? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Item 3, report to Council for the Wagga Wagga City Council proposed acquisition of easement for levy bank and public access at Riverina's site 8991 Hammond Avenue. Lot 2, DP 540063. Recommendation that Council note the recent letter of offer from Wagga City Council in the above matter and accept the terms of acquisition and authorise the General Manager to sign the necessary documents associated with the easement acquisition. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Quinn. Councillor Braid. Any questions? All that. I'll put that then. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. What's our next page, folks? Is
through you, Chair, the reason that wasn't in confidential is it's public land, a sale.
We have no issue with it not being in confidential.
Yeah, I think it's great that it's not in confidential. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just interesting to note that, it would be, if it's Wagga Council, it would potentially be in confidential, so.
I'm nearly there. Oh, yeah, that'll... Ah, you learn something every day. Okay, items 4 and 5 and 6, could someone move we deal with those in closed business? Councillor Conkey, Councillor Meyer, all those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Questions and statements. Starting on my left, Councillor Quinn.
Statement, Mr. Chairman, I wish everybody a very happy and pleasant Christmas to all the members of the board and staff.
Thank you. Councillor Meyer.
2 small items, Mr. Chair. I've been reading EOS statements for solar farms for about 3 months now. They're all done in small type in blueprint. And I noticed that now we've adopted blueprint for agendas. It's terribly hard to read at times. Is there some way we can overcome it?
Yes, there is, and yes, it will happen.
And the second point I wanted to make, we've got all this wonderful technology. We should have each agenda item appearing on the screen. That way blokes like me won't get mixed up.
Through you, Chair, that agree, and that will happen starting February.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Conkey.
2 things, 2 brief things as well. Concerning the water conservation measures, can I encourage you, Mr. Chair, to take the front foot on that and go public and get out there in the next couple of days if the media, if Josh can organise some media for you to get out there and to stress that these are conservation measures and that we encourage people to take on board these measures so
Certainly.
that the full public's fully aware of it. And the second one, concerning our motion, now I'm not going to talk about the motion that was got up, but I'm really surprised that that this board cannot overrule or direct the general manager and the director to take certain action. And I'd like to know what other policies that applies to, because I find that extremely strange that we don't have the power at this board meeting to direct the general manager or the director to do certain things. And I'd like to know where else that applies.
Thank you. Good point. Councillor Fennell.
There's many areas we can't. It's no different to a general purpose council where we can't actually direct the general manager to do certain things. But that said, doesn't mean we shouldn't look into it. Just to repeat the comments from Councillor Quinn, I wish everyone a happy and holy Christmas and a pleasant break. I'd like to thank the General Manager and Director of Engineering and all their staff and Amanda for their great support throughout the year. It's been fantastic. And even for people like me, with this modern IT, I'll get there eventually. I'm not sure what IT stands for. It's the standard in-house joke. But no, look, it's been a wonderful year. I'd like to thank the Chairman for his leadership this year. It's been wonderful and has done a great job in representing our board and our organisation. We have a great organisation and happy to assist you with getting that message out there, Mr. Chair, because whilst my position on this water situation, I fully endorse and agree we must conserve our water and we must get that message out there. And it's up to us to assist doing that. So I wish everyone a happy break and look forward to getting back into it next year.
Thank you, Councillor Fennell. Councillor Keenan.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to echo everyone's comments and wish everyone a happy and safe Christmas. I'd also like to just acknowledge with the boardroom that we are in at the moment, also a training room and certainly multi-purpose uses for the staff, a great asset for not only us as board members but for the staff as well going forward. And I'd like to put it on the record, and maybe I might move a notice of motion, but that we consider naming this room, and my suggestion for a name is to name it after the founding chair of Riverina Riverina Water, Councillor Pat Brazel, that I think, given his contribution to the organisation, that might be something worth considering, but to acknowledge his contribution. But aside from that, thank you everybody for working together this last year, and echo Councillor Fennell's comments that as the Chair, Councillor Verdon, that I think you've done a fantastic job. So, and looking forward to working with you again next year.
Thank you. Councillor Keenan. Councillor Koschel. Thank you. Councillor Burke?
Yeah, basically echo the same sentiments. Oh, sorry. We're right. Yeah, echo the same sentiments around the table to the Chair and General Manager and Director and the Board. It's been great working with everyone. Like we have good debates and we all come out of those debates still speaking. It's been a great committee to be part of. So thanks for the year and all the best for Christmas, and I hope you all have a really good time with your families and relax. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bray.
I would like to mention the same as have a great Christmas, and I hope all your families do too, so that helps everybody. And we all had a great time at each board meeting, and I think we all enjoy one another's company, even though we might have different ideas at different times, but we're able to do that, and that is very, very good. So thank you ever so much for a lovely last year.
Thank you. Councillor Bray. Emily, do you have anything you wanted to add?
No, nothing further. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Mr General Manager?
No, thanks, Chair.
Mr Director?
Yes, thank you, Mr Chair. Just Merry Christmas to you and all your family. It warms my heart that Councillor Meyer can now hear all of the debate. As an engineer, you build a lot of stuff, but to see firsthand it be put to good use is very rewarding for myself, and I'll pass on your thank you to my staff.
Let me also point out that this is the first day that I've ever used hearing loops.
Greg, do you have anything you want? Okay. Councillors, was remiss of me earlier that there was a couple of new issues. Just for the first time, we have our Manager, Governance and Human Resources here today, Mr Simon Thompson, and Simon, welcome, and also Josh Lang, our new Community Engagement Officer. Is this his first council meeting? Most of you would know Josh, coming from Wagga City, and he's settled into the role very quickly and well, and so we certainly welcome both of you to the board meetings. Simon, did you have anything you wanted to add? No, thank you. Okay, right, very good. Look, before we go into closed business, I'd just like to, I guess, reiterate what everyone else has said. It has been a very successful year and a very constructive year, and I'd like to thank all the board members for their contribution and their cooperation in making sure that they put the interests of Riverina Water first, and I think that has been evidenced in what we've been able to achieve, and we certainly hope that that will continue. We've had a number of challenges and we'll still have some challenges going forward, but I think we are extremely blessed that we do have a very highly skilled and competent staff who have delivered on these projects, and I'd like to extend my thanks to Andrew and Bede and their respective staff for the way that they have conducted themselves this year. There has been a bit of a big turnaround in the way we do things, and we certainly appreciate that. And on a final note, I'd like to wish all the board members and the staff a very happy and safe Christmas, and let's hope the rains come in the new year. All right, thank you. We'll have somebody move us into closed business. Thank you, Councillor Fennell, Councillor Keenan. And item 1. Oh, sorry, all those in favour, say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Do we turn these off now?
We're just organising to change the,
Okay.
and it'll happen pretty quickly, hopefully.
Do we have